What you're about to witness destroyed Ellen DeGeneres' career and changed American television forever. But the most shocking part isn't how she attacked the largest church in America. It's the 12 words Joel Osteen whispered back that made her collapse on live TV. 47 seconds of footage that 3 networks tried to bury, but 60 million people saw it anyway. Ellen DeGeneres, the woman who built an empire on destroying people with a smile, leans forward with predatory hunger and delivers what she thinks will be the killing blow. Joel, let's be honest. You're running the biggest religious scam in Texas. 16,000 seats, $2 million every Sunday. When are you going to stop fooling these desperate people? The audience expects Joel to crumble like every other pastor attacked on television. But Joel Osteen doesn't defend himself. He doesn't argue. Instead, he does something no one was prepared for. He smiles with the kind of peace that only comes from knowing something the rest of the world doesn't. And then he says 12 words that would haunt Ellen for the rest of her life. 12 words that made her realize she had just mocked the wrong man on the wrong day. 12 words that turned a planned assassination into the most watched spiritual awakening in television history. If you want to see these impossible 12 words that silenced the most powerful woman in Hollywood, hit subscribe right now because what happens next will blow your mind. The cameras kept rolling, but what happened next was so devastating that Ellen was no longer the same person by the end of the show. This isn't just about a talk show gone wrong. This is how one man's faith exposed the emptiness of an entire industry. And it started 3 days earlier when America's pastor received a phone call that would change everything. 3 days before Ellen's world crumbled, Joel Osteen was kneeling on the cold marble floor of his father's old study at 3:17 a.m., surrounded by over 2,000 pieces of hate mail that had arrived in just 1 week. The letters called him a fraud, a fake, a wolf in sheep's clothing bleeding money from desperate believers. But this wasn't the luxurious mansion critics imagined. The walls were bare except for his father John's worn Bible and a faded photograph of the tiny church where it all began. His phone buzzed with the message that would change everything. Ellen wants you Thursday. She's calling it America's false prophets. They have Hurricane Harvey footage, financial documents, former members willing to testify. This is war, Joel. You interested? Joel stared at the message, then looked up at his father's picture. He'd been waiting for this moment his entire life, though he didn't know it yet. Not the moment to be destroyed on television, but the moment to choose between safety and truth. But what Ellen's producers didn't know, what nobody in Hollywood knew, was that Joel had received a phone call at 2:41 a.m. that same night. A call that would either destroy his reputation forever or prove that miracles still happen in America. The voice belonged to Maria Santos, a single mother from Houston whose world had been destroyed by Hurricane Harvey. She was calling from her car outside a gas station, her 3 children sleeping in the back seat, with nowhere to go and $17 to her name. Maria had been living in the Lakewood Church shelter for 3 months after losing everything. She told Joel something that made him weep in that empty study. "Pastor, I know what people say about you on the news. But when my daughter asked if God still loved us after we lost our house, you didn't give her a sermon. You got on your knees in that shelter and promised her that God's love doesn't depend on what we own. She believed you. And now she prays for you every night because she says mean people are trying to hurt the man who saved her faith." That conversation lasted 2 hours. Maria told him that 3 families from the shelter were watching Ellen's show on Thursday, not to see him get attacked, but to see if their pastor would stand up for the God who had carried them through their darkest hour. Joel made a promise that would either make him look like a fool on national television or prove that some things are worth losing everything to defend. He promised Maria that if anyone tried to tell her that her faith was fake, that her prayers were worthless, that her God was just a money-making scheme, he would stand up and fight for her truth, even if it cost him everything. The morning of the show, Joel didn't eat breakfast. He didn't rehearse answers or practice sound bites. Instead, he drove to the cemetery where his father was buried and made a decision that would cost him his reputation in Hollywood's eyes but give him something far more valuable in return. Standing at John Osteen's grave, Joel decided that if Ellen wanted to destroy faith on television, she was going to have to go through someone who had already lost everything once and wasn't afraid to do it again for the people who believed. When Joel Osteen walked onto Ellen's stage that Thursday afternoon, he wasn't wearing the designer suits other guests fought to get loaned. He wore his father's navy blazer, the one with the small cross pin his mother had given him, and he carried something in his pocket that would soon change television forever. When Joel Osteen walked onto Ellen's stage, something shifted in the atmosphere that even the seasoned camera operators felt in their bones. He wasn't performing the usual celebrity entrance wave or charming smile. He simply nodded once and said, "Thank you for having me, Ellen. I know this won't be easy." That's when Ellen's predator instincts kicked in full force. "Joel, let's skip the pleasantries," she announced with that trademark smile that had destroyed careers before. "Your church seats 16,800 people. That's over $2 million in collection plates every Sunday. Meanwhile, your congregation includes some of the poorest families in Houston. Don't you think there's something morally wrong with getting rich off desperate people's faith?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a gun that had just been fired. Joel looked at Ellen for a long moment, then at the audience, then back at Ellen. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet the boom operators strained to catch every word. "Ellen, you're absolutely right about those numbers. But you're missing the most beautiful part of what actually happens with that money." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper that made Ellen's eyes narrow with suspicion. "This is Maria Santos," Joel said, unfolding what appeared to be a handwritten letter. 3 months ago, Hurricane Harvey destroyed her home, her car, everything she owned. She's been living in our church with her 3 children ever since. Last week, she got a job interview, but she had no professional clothes. Our congregation didn't just pray for her, they bought her a suit, paid for childcare, and when she got the job, they helped her put down a deposit on an apartment. Ellen tried to interrupt, but Joel continued with growing intensity. "The $2 million you mentioned? It paid for Maria's new start, and for James Wilson's cancer treatment when his insurance ran out, and for the Martinez family's groceries when unemployment ran out. Ellen, you're trying to make generosity sound like greed." Ellen's smile faltered as she realized her carefully planned trap was backfiring. She shuffled through her cards desperately. "But Joel, you live in a $10 million mansion while preaching to people who can barely pay rent. How do you justify that kind of hypocrisy?" The audience leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. That's when Joel did something that nobody expected. He stood up, walked over to Ellen's desk, and placed the letter directly in front of her. "Ellen, that mansion you're talking about was my father's house, built with money from his books, not church donations. But since you brought it up, let me show you something that might surprise you." He pulled out his phone and did something that sent shockwaves through the room. "This is a live video feed from that house right now." The audience gasped as they saw families moving through what looked like a community center, children playing, adults in support group circles, meals being served. "We converted it into a crisis counseling center 3 years ago. Ellen, while you've been researching ways to attack me, homeless families have been finding hope in those rooms." The audience was no longer with Ellen. The nervous energy in the room had shifted completely. But Ellen, sensing she was losing control, loaded her biggest weapon. What she said next would either destroy Joel Osteen or prove that some men can't be broken by lies. If you're watching this thinking there's no way this gets more intense, hit that subscribe button right now because Ellen's about to launch an attack so vicious that what happens next will leave you speechless. Ellen leaned back with calculated cruelty and delivered what she thought would be the final blow. "Joel, I have footage from Hurricane Harvey showing Lakewood Church's doors locked while people were drowning outside. You abandoned your city when they needed you most. How do you explain that to the families who lost everything while you protected your precious building?" The studio fell completely silent. Ellen's Hurricane Harvey accusation was the killing blow she'd been saving, the moment designed to destroy Joel's credibility forever. The audience held its breath, waiting for his defense. But Joel didn't look panicked. Instead, he did something that made Ellen's blood run cold. He smiled with the peaceful confidence of a man holding the truth. "Ellen," Joel said quietly, reaching into his jacket pocket again. "I was hoping you wouldn't bring up Hurricane Harvey, because what I'm about to show you is going to expose who's really been lying to America." He pulled out his phone and held it toward the camera. "This is body cam footage from the Houston Fire Department during the hurricane. It was never released to the media because it destroys the narrative you just repeated. The footage began playing, and the audience gasped. Instead of locked doors, they saw Lakewood Church's massive lobby packed with hundreds of cots, volunteers distributing food, and Joel himself, soaking wet, helping carry elderly evacuees to safety. The timestamp showed this was happening during the exact hours the media claimed the church was closed. Ellen, while news outlets were filming our flooded parking garage and claiming we were closed, we had already rescued over 800 people from their homes and brought them here, Joel continued, his voice growing stronger. But that's not the part that's going to destroy your credibility. The part that's going to end your career is what you said to one of those evacuees. Joel looked directly into the camera and delivered the words that would break Ellen's world apart. Maria Santos, the woman I told you about earlier? She wasn't just any hurricane victim, Ellen. She was standing in our shelter 3 months ago when you sent your production assistant to interview evacuees. Your team was looking for people willing to say negative things about Lakewood on camera. Ellen's face went pale. This wasn't in her research. This wasn't supposed to happen. Maria told me exactly what your assistant offered her, Joel continued relentlessly. $5,000 to go on television and say that Lakewood turned her family away during the storm. When she refused and told your assistant that we saved her children's lives, do you know what your production team told her? The silence was deafening. Ellen couldn't speak. They told her that her story didn't fit the narrative. That truth doesn't sell as well as scandal. Ellen, you just accused me of abandoning Houston while sitting across from the man who personally carried Maria's disabled son to safety through 4 feet of floodwater. That's when Joel stood up and delivered the blow that would end everything. Ellen, I want you to meet someone who's been waiting 3 months to tell America what really happened. He pulled out his phone and made a live call that would shatter Ellen's career in real time. Maria, Joel said into the phone, his voice carrying through the studio microphone. Are you watching? A strong, clear voice filled the silent studio. Yes, Pastor Joel. And Ellen, I've been praying for this moment. The audience gasped. This wasn't scripted. This was raw, unfiltered truth happening live on television. Maria, would you please tell Ellen and America what really happened during Hurricane Harvey? Joel asked gently. Maria's voice grew powerful. Ellen, when the water was rising and my children were crying, Pastor Joel and his church didn't just open their doors, they sent boats to get us. Pastor Joel himself helped pull my wheelchair-bound son from our house. We lived in that church for 3 months, and they never asked us for a single dollar. They gave us food, clothes, hope, and love when we had nothing left. Ellen sat frozen, her carefully constructed attack crumbling in real time. And Ellen, Maria continued, her voice now carrying the weight of absolute truth, when your people offered me money to lie about the man who saved my family, I told them that some things are more important than money. Truth is more important than your TV show. Pastor Joel is more important than your ratings. The camera captured Ellen's complete breakdown as Maria delivered the final devastating blow. Ellen, I'm watching you attack the man who gave my children hope when they thought God had forgotten them. You should be ashamed of yourself. If you can't believe what you just witnessed, and you want to see Ellen's complete meltdown that happens next, smash that subscribe button because what Joel says in response will change television history forever. For 30 seconds, Ellen couldn't stop shaking. The most powerful woman in daytime television sat broken in her own chair, her carefully constructed world collapsing as Maria's words echoed through the silent studio. Her producers screamed through her earpiece to cut to commercial, but she ripped it out and threw it on the floor. 20 million people watched her empire crumble in real time. When Ellen finally looked up at Joel, her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know how to stop. Joel leaned forward with the gentleness of someone who had been exactly where she was. Stop what, Ellen? Her voice cracked completely. Stop pretending. Stop attacking. Stop being so angry at a God I don't even understand. The admission hit the studio like a bomb. This wasn't the Ellen anyone knew. This was a woman who had been performing her entire life, finally admitting she was drowning inside her own success. Ellen, Joel said softly, removing his father's navy blazer. Underneath was a simple white shirt and the small cross pin his mother had given him 20 years ago. What if I told you that the God you're angry at has been trying to reach you through every person whose life you've just heard tonight? Ellen looked at him with eyes full of desperate hope and terror. How can you have such peace when I just tried to destroy everything you've built? How can you not hate me right now? That's when Joel did something that nobody expected. He rolled up his sleeves and showed Ellen something that made her gasp. On his left wrist was a small, faded scar that the cameras had never seen before. Ellen, 15 years ago, I was sitting in a hospital room holding my father's hand as he died from kidney failure. He looked at me with his last breath and said, "Joel, I failed you. I never taught you how to be strong enough for what's coming." The studio was dead silent. America's most optimistic preacher was revealing his deepest wound on live television. That night, I was so broken, so angry at God for taking the only man who believed in me, that I put a razor blade to this wrist and asked God why he would leave me alone to fail at everything my father built. Joel's voice grew stronger, more certain. But something happened in that bathroom, Ellen. I heard a voice as clear as yours right now say, "I didn't take your father from you. I sent him to prepare you for this moment." Ellen's sobbing had stopped. She was listening with the intensity of someone hearing their own story told by a stranger. "Ellen, I realized that night that my father didn't fail me. He spent his whole life showing me that broken people aren't broken by accident, they're broken on purpose, because only broken people know how to help other broken people heal." Joel looked directly into her eyes. "The same God who saved me in that bathroom is sitting here with us right now, waiting for you to stop running from the love you've been searching for your whole life." Ellen's voice was barely audible. "What if I'm too damaged? What if I've hurt too many people? What if God can't forgive what I've become?" Joel smiled through his own tears, and for the first time in television history, America saw both the pastor and the broken man he used to be in the same moment. "Ellen, the God I serve doesn't just forgive damaged people. He specializes in taking the most broken things in this world and turning them into his masterpieces. He took a suicidal preacher's son and let him give hope to millions. What do you think he could do with a woman who spent her life making people smile?" The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of possibility, redemption, and a hope that neither of them had dared believe in just an hour ago. And then Ellen did something that would break the internet and change television forever. If what you just witnessed moved something deep inside your soul, and you want to see the moment that changed both their lives forever, hit subscribe right now because Ellen's about to do something that will leave you speechless. Ellen stood up slowly, walked around her desk, and did something that broke the internet forever. In front of 20 million people, Ellen DeGeneres knelt down beside Joel's chair and asked the question that would define the rest of her life. "Will you teach me how to pray?" The studio fell into holy silence. This wasn't scripted. This wasn't performance. This was raw, desperate surrender happening live on television. Joel reached down, took Ellen's shaking hands, and began to pray. Not polished televangelist words, but the broken, honest plea of one wounded soul helping another find home. "God, Ellen is here. She's tired of hiding, tired of pretending. She's ready to stop running. Would you show her what you showed me? That she's loved exactly as she is." Ellen's sobs echoed through the silent studio as 20 million people witnessed real faith in action. When the prayer ended, Ellen stayed on her knees, looking up with the wonder of someone seeing color for the first time. "I felt something," she whispered. "I actually felt something I haven't felt since I was a child." Then Joel revealed the 12 words that had been hidden all along. The 12 words that started this entire story. Looking directly into the camera, Joel said, "Ellen, God's love for you isn't based on your performance." Those 12 simple words shattered every wall Ellen had built around her heart. The woman who had spent decades performing love finally understood what real love felt like. The show ended without fanfare, without dancing, without goodbye. Just Ellen sitting on her studio floor, holding Joel's hand like a lifeline, while America watched two broken people find healing together. Within hours, the footage hit 500 million views. Not because it was shocking, but because it was real. For the first time in television history, audiences witnessed authentic transformation instead of manufactured drama. If this moment moved your heart and you believe some stories need to be shared, hit subscribe. 3 days later, Ellen stepped away from television forever. In a simple video with no makeup, no studio audience, she said, "I spent my career making people laugh because I was terrified they'd see how broken I really was. Joel taught me something more powerful. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is let people see you heal." Ellen disappeared from Hollywood, but not from life. Reports surfaced of her at children's hospitals, homeless shelters, sitting with broken people. No cameras, no publicity, just a woman who finally learned to love without performing. The Ellen who had built an empire on other people's pain was gone forever. 6 months later, a small video emerged that no network would air. Ellen and Joel in a Houston children's hospital, reading to kids whose families had lost everything in Hurricane Harvey. At the end, Maria Santos appeared on camera with her 3 children, all living in their new home. "Hi everyone, it's Maria," she said, smiling. "I want you to know that the people who tried to make me lie about Pastor Joel, they don't understand what real love looks like. But Ellen does now. She calls me every week to check on my kids. She's learned what Pastor Joel tried to teach her, that God's love isn't about what you can do for him. It's about what he's already done for you." The interview didn't just break the internet. It broke the wall between performance and truth, between fame and faith. In that rubble, millions of people found permission to stop pretending and start healing. Churches across America reported record attendance, not from people seeking entertainment, but from people seeking the authentic love they witnessed that Thursday afternoon. Joel returned to Lakewood changed by the experience. "Ellen taught me something I'll never forget," he said in his next sermon. "Sometimes the people who attack your faith the hardest are the ones who need it the most. They're not your enemies, they're your mission field." The 12 words that silenced Ellen's room became the 12 words that awakened America's heart. God's love for you isn't based on your performance. Those words were printed on t-shirts, painted on church walls, and whispered by parents to children who thought they had to be perfect to be loved. If this story changed how you think about faith, forgiveness, and second chances, make sure you're subscribed because stories like this are exactly why this channel exists, to show you that miracles still happen when people choose love over fear. Today, Ellen runs a crisis counseling center in Houston, working alongside the families she once would have mocked. Joel continues pastoring, but with a deeper understanding that his greatest sermon wasn't preached from a pulpit, it was lived out in a television studio when he chose grace over revenge. And Maria Santos? She's now a volunteer coordinator at Lakewood Church, helping other hurricane survivors find the hope that Ellen's attack accidentally revealed. Because sometimes God uses our worst moments to create our greatest miracles. Share this video not for the views, but for the person in your life who needs to know that God's love isn't about their performance, it's about his heart.